like to welcome you to our first webinar in 2023. And the title of the webinar is Screening, Can We Do It Better? And how to improve the screening quality in LaserAI. So before we start, I would like to remind you that last year, we have started a new group on LinkedIn, AI in Evidence-Based Healthcare. And we are organizing weekly Tech Tuesdays, where machine learning experts explain new relevant papers without technical jargon, and Friday Journal Club, where we share new research in evidence synthesis method. So we will send a link in the chat. If you're interested and would like to join the discussion, please join the group and share any information in the topic or the events which you find interesting. So for today's agenda, we will talk first about best practices in the title and abstract screening during the systematic review. And then we will also show you how LaserAI can support you in the screening process. Our first speaker is Ewelina Sadowska. She's an evidence synthesis specialist at Evidence Prime, and she's responsible for testing new solutions in LaserAI and conducting evidence synthesis research. Second speaker, Ewa Borowiack. She's also an evidence synthesis specialist with 15 years of experience in conducting HTA reports, systematic reviews, and targeted literature reviews.
Hi, my name is Ewelina, and today with Ewa, we would like to present you some tips, how to support the screening process and how we can do it with our tool, LaserAI. I will be responsible for the theoretical part, and Ewa will show you how to do a practical part in LaserAI. A major task of a systematic review is the identification of studies eligible for a review. A typical process of identifying these studies begins with a screening abstract, which actively eliminates irrelevant studies. Yet, efficient and accurate abstract screening has the huge potential to reduce review time because every citation that is correctly removed represents decreased resource burden in the full text screening phase. And the review team and members will find abstract screening a quite tedious task. And as a result, they naturally attempt to speed through the process and make decisions about each abstract as quickly as possible. Their speed often corresponds to their fatigue. So the less fatigued they are, the quicker and more reliable abstract screening is. Although there are a lot of guidelines about conducting systematic review, and there is less practical information about best practice methods for the title and abstract screening stage, such as use of calibration exercise, reconciliation, or managing screeners. But recently, it has been slowly changing, and some best practice guidelines were developed to help future review teams and managers. And here, we can see the example of the best practices process during the screening. And the first two instruments that we should introduce before screening are screening guide and its validation during the calibration exercise. And today we will focus on these two steps. Screening guide has many other synonyms like title and abstract screening form, sheet, tool, decision algorithm, etc. But although the terminology is various, the main aim is the same. Abstract screening tool guides screeners in their decisions about whether a citation is eligible for the review and plays an important role in identifying a representative sample of studies for the review. The standard screening guide consists of a list of screening questions and other components. And first, we want to focus on the screening question. And screening guide questions are based on the eligibility criteria and should include items that are objective, single-barreled, that use the same sentence structure and include only yes or no answers. So let's go to the first point. What does it mean single-barreled? So each question should ask the screener about just one aspect of the abstract. The question should, does the abstract indicate that adults over 18 years old were sampled and that the sample was from a general population? Ask about two things, age and sample's characteristic. So each of them is important, so they should be reflected in a separate screening questions. Next, what does it mean that questions should be objective? So abstract screening questions should not be subjective for the screener. For example, the question, does the abstract indicate that the high quality design was used, is quite ambiguous because high quality is subjective. A better question might ask, does the study use a randomized control trial design? And it's much easier to interpret this question than the previous one. Next, we have the same structure of questions. An abstract screening tool might include two questions, like in this example, was the study published after 1987? And did the study evaluate an ADHD symptom reduction drug? So although both questions are unambiguous and single-barreled, the differences in sentence structure may confuse screeners. So we suggest, therefore, that the questions should follow the same structure throughout the tool, like in the example below. And the last one are yes/no answers. The answer to each abstract screening question should follow the same format. I mean, yes or no. Answering yes or no allows for a quick and uninterrupted abstract screening. Moreover, it's recommended that all yes and all no answer result the same action for each question. For example, contributes toward being eligible or toward being ineligible. We have our question. So now it's important to ensure that the abstract screening tool is organized hierarchically. What does it mean? The easiest question should be at the beginning of our tool. And here we mean easy question as ones that can be answered without any interpretation, investigation, or assumption. A great example is question first and the second that require abstract screeners to read only the citation, like is the date of publication on or after 2000, or is the abstract written in English? And difficult questions are those that require the abstract screener to make inferences from the text, or that required reading the entire abstract carefully. As an example, it may be question 3 and 4, for example, for study design. Does the study include prognostic data? And the fourth one is the study population patients with BRCA1 gene mutations related to the study population. So the screener, as I said before, must really carefully read and interpret the abstract and make a judgment based on its experience and knowledge. So here's the example of the first question in the screening guide. We want to include only primary studies of any design that addressed non-invasive ventilation for individuals with acute hypoxic respiratory failure caused by COVID-19. So why in this case a question about a case report should be the first one? And here's the justification for our choice. Most of all, it's easy to judge by the screeners, even by those least experienced. Case studies have really characteristic synonyms and keywords like as you can see here, for example, year of a patient, age of a patient, and for example, case history. Moreover, there are a lot of case studies in our review So this question will really quickly exclude a large group of studies. As I said previously, a screening guide is created on the basis of eligibility criteria, but not all criteria are taken into consideration during title and abstract screening. Screening question should be adapted to both types of screening, title and abstract and full text screening. As you can see here in title and abstract screening tool, we have to cover eligibility criteria, only those possible to find in a title and abstract, whereas in a full text screening tool, we have to cover all eligibility criteria, and as a result is far more detailed. So here we have the real example of differences between inclusion criteria, title and abstract screening, and full text screening. Our example is transthyretin amyloidosis with cardiomyopathy, and we will refer to it for the rest of our webinar. As we can see, the full text screening guide is far more detailed than the title and abstract screening guide. For example, in the last question related to outcomes, in the abstract, authors often provide just one or two most important outcomes, and we can't be sure if in a full PDF there will be nothing more. So for that reason, we ask about the cardiovascular outcome when records will be included for the full text screening. So now let's switch to LaserAI and see how to create our screening questions in our tool.
We are now in LaserAI tool, where we will conduct our example screening for transthyretin amyloidosis. And we are now in admin mode. And to enter our screening guide in Laser, in our example project, we need to click title and abstract screening instruction and choose among three available options. We can load a standard instruction, pick one of the previously created and saved in our organization template, or use an empty form. And for our example, we choose the last option. On the right, there is a preview where we can see the same screening guide as our review team. And on the left, we have a panel to create our screening instruction. And in our example, we have to add three screening questions related to study type, population, and intervention. Let's start with first screening question, which is the study type, as the easiest one. To add a screening question, first we have to click on Add button. We create three fields for our screening question. First, I enter wrong study type. I create a tag code and copy my screening question to the instruction field. And in this project, we will include only primary studies. So now let's move to our second question related to population. I copy my screening question. I create reason of exclusion. I add tag code and copy my screening question to the instruction field. And in this project, we will include only patient with transthyretin amyloidosis with concomitant cardiomyopathy. And finally, we have to add our third question related to intervention. I copy question, create reason of exclusion, I add my tag code copy my screening question to the instruction field. And we have finished the first part of our screening guide, and now it's time to focus on other component of our screening instruction.
So let's go back to our theoretical part. We should be aware that simple questions may not be enough for reviewers. For instance, in terms of this question related to study type, we must know if our screeners can handle this question, if it's difficult for them, and if they are experienced enough to deal with it. So when we have a difficult example or question to ask, other components may be helpful for the reviewers. In our example, the term longitudinal study may not be familiar to less experienced screeners, so it's worth adding a definition. What's more, desired and undesired keywords may help to catch important parts of the abstract by highlighting them. On the basis of the previous example, we can support our screening process in 3 ways: by adding examples, difficult cases, and definitions, by adding keywords and synonyms, and finally, tag instructions. So here we have an example of a screening guide. Authors provided here examples of records that should be excluded. In other words, they are clear signals when a record is not important and screeners can exclude it. In the case of quantitative design, admins provided a list of irrelevant study examples like case study research or social observations. And in the second example, they listed all types of study that are not human. Next examples are difficult cases explaining problematic issues. In the case of study population with confirmed or suspected COVID-19, screeners were really frequently unsure if the study population was consistent with those from the inclusion criteria. So admin provided some examples of which disease may be potentially associated with COVID-19 and should be definitely included, like, for example, pneumonia. And as we can see in a second example, even the easiest question may be problematic. Here, reviewers were unsure if a mixed population may be eligible for the study. So the admin provided an explanation. In understanding the topic of screening better, definitions are also helpful. We can show general, well-known definitions, like in the first example, or project-specific definitions dedicated to our systematic review, if it's necessary. So next element of our screening guide may be keywords and synonyms. They can be obtained from various sources like MESH, used previously search strategy, or the analysis of word frequency, for example, in WordSearch software. Moreover, we can use LaserAI to upload keywords from the previous project done in our organization, of course, if they are consistent with the current one. It's important to realize that keywords are not always the same as synonyms. Synonyms means just exactly the same as the terms that we look for, whereas keywords are words that indicate important phrases related to our topic, but not necessarily the same with the same meaning. In our example, synonym of full text evaluation were found in MESH, and the meaning is almost the same, whereas keywords are wider concept and include, for example, all words related to the method of economic evaluation estimation, like decision tree or Monte Carlo. And the last component may be tags. They are frequently used to support screening in a few ways. First, tags may be helpful in citation search, and for example, we may ask our screeners to tag relevant systematic review for further citation search. We may also use tags for monitoring or updates to label ongoing trials or protocols. And then after a while, we can monitor them if new results were published. So next, we may use tags to stream evidence in a project according to their type, for example, human, animal, or in vitro data. And finally, they are really helpful to organize references better. For example, screener may tag included abstracts with labels related to study type or sample size, and then during the full text screening, it's easier to sort them and to screen them in particular batches. So now let's see how to implement those three types of components in previously created screening question form in LaserAI.
Okay, so now it's time to add more information to our screening guide that will support our team during screening. First element to add in our project are notes. Let's start with question related to study type. In this project, we want to add notes which records should not be excluded. And in our example, we will add some red flag to this screening question. Our screeners should be very careful with conference, abstract, and letter to editors. I copy my note and add this note to the instruction field. Second note is necessary in intervention question. Here we have to add names of all therapies being specific for transthyretin amyloidosis like patisiran or inotersen. So I copy this note and add them to instruction field. After entering notes, we can focus on keyword section. In case of study type, we don't have to start from scratch. We can reuse terms from our previous project, and to do this, we click Import. And add keywords by clicking Import Keywords. Okay, keywords related to intervention and population domain were taken directly from search strategy. I copy these keywords and add them to the keyword section. And undesired keywords were generated using WordStart software for word frequency analysis. I copy terms and add them to the undesired keyword section. And the last step is to add structure comments known as tags. To organize our work better, we may ask our screeners to tag observational studies according to number of patients included. I copy tag name We may also ask our screeners to tag relevant systematic review for further citation search. So I copy tag name and add them to structure comments. We have to remember to add this tag instruction for our screeners. And to do this, I copy instruction for study type and add them to the instruction field. To finish this stage, you can save instruction. And now our screening guide is ready to validate in the calibration exercise, but first some theory.
After creation discussion of the screening tool, all screeners should independently screen the same subset of abstracts using the screening tool. And this step is called calibration or pilot exercise. For the pilot exercise, we need a few elements. First, tool, like in our case, LaserAI, a screening guide prepared in the previous step, a screening team, an appropriate sample of studies, and some conditions indicating that the pilot was successful, like, for example, acceptable level of disagreement rate. And although a calibration exercise seems to be really time-consuming process, there are several reasons why it's worth conducting it. First of all, it's great training for all reviewers, but especially those less experienced. And it's a great opportunity to gather feedback about the screening guide from them. A calibration exercise may answer many questions like, are there any limitations of the screening form? Are there any issues that haven't been addressed before? Are the questions expressed clearly? And finally, if the calibration exercise is conducted in a tool like LaserAI, it's also a training set for the AI model, which is required to further records prioritization during the main screening stage. And many institutions suggest using calibration exercise, but there are some discrepancies between existing guidelines concerning the most appropriate number of records that should be used during the calibration exercise. So, for example, we have 10 to 12 records according to Cochrane Handbook, 10 to 20% of all studies, 20 to 30 records according to Polanin study. And the Frampton provided a wider definition that we include studies definitely eligible, unsure, and definitely ineligible. And our research, based on the real systematic reviews, shows a wide variety of a number of records included in the calibration exercise. So in practice, authors take between 20 and 200 records in title and abstract screening phase, and 11 to 50 in a full text screening. As you can see here, pilot testing is a quite multi-stage process. We have to start by training our team in terms of used tools and the screening guide. Then we can start our calibration exercise in the chosen sample of records. Each study should be assessed by all the reviewers who will be conducting the screening process. So now let's see how calibration exercise setup looks in a LaserAI.
To set up calibration exercise, we need only three things: our screening instruction, team, and records. Instruction has been already prepared, and now we can import our studies. And to do this, we click Import button and select RIS file with search results. In the meantime, when records are uploading, we can select our team. And to do it, we click on the team section and invite screeners. For calibration exercise, we need only sample of studies. So next, let's distribute just part of our records among screeners. We switch to project panel, select title and abstract screening. We select double screening for our calibration exercise and click on distribution. After search, we have almost 300 of records, but for calibration exercise, we need only 50 of them, so I change number. I select proportional distribution. I I click Distribute. Now we may start our calibration exercise. And to do it, let's keep to the screener panel. We enter focus mode. And on the right, there is a preview with our screening guide. And our screeners have access to the screening guide during the whole screening. Our screeners may personalize the screening guide, but only keyword section by adding or removing keywords. We may also change the color of our highlights by clicking color setting. And for example, I may use brighter color. These keywords may support screening in two ways. First, by highlighting, like we see in the focus mode, and by filtering. And for example, we want to filter and screen all non-human studies. And to do it, we click on Filter section. We see the list of our keywords, which belongs to the study type, population, and intervention. I select keywords related to animal studies. And quickly exclude selected keywords. Okay, now let's back for a moment to our focus mode. During screening, we also have the option to add some our comments. It can be very useful for further discussion during disagreement reconciliation. And for example, in this case, we are not sure if this particular record is relevant. We answer yes to first two screening questions related to study type and population, but there is no specific name of therapy which were mentioned in our screening guide, rather the whole group of treatment is presented. So we have right to feel a little bit insecure with our decision. So I add a comment to comment section. Provide justification and include this record. We should continue our screening, and at the end we should click send button and send this all decision to our admin.
The next step of the calibration exercise is to show results to screeners and analyze disagreements prior to conduct the further screening. Also, this is a moment for feedback from our reviewers, and it's one of the most critical steps of the calibration exercise because it's a potential source of information about problems during screening. And to avoid all of them, we can, for example, change the screening guide.
To gather feedback from our screeners, we may use our LaserAI module for conflict resolution. And on the left, there is a list of references with different decisions. On the right, we make a final disagreement reconciliation. We have all decisions and comments available, so it's easier to discuss particular abstracts. And what's more, we have access to our screener guide. In that case, we see disagreement between reviewers. One of our screeners excluded records because of the wrong intervention, whereas the second one included because study mentioned the whole group of antisense oligonucleotide. we make a final decision to include this record, but we have to remember to modify our screening guide by adding a note that studies with whole therapeutical groups without specific name of the substance should also be included. In second example, one of the screeners excluded records because of wrong population. There is no information in this abstract that cardiomyopathy was inclusion criterion, but a second reviewer, more experienced, included it because of the fact that cardiac may not always occur in the abstract, and in the results section there is a sentence suggesting that cardiac subgroup was evaluated in the study. Finally, we include this study and make decision to change our screening guide by adding more detailed information for our screeners. Now, after discussion with review team, we can go to the last stage of the calibration exercise, and Ewelina tell a little bit more about it.
The last step of calibration exercise is to assess its success. To do it, at the beginning of a calibration exercise, we had to decide what's the acceptable level of agreement in this project. And at the end of the calibration exercise, we need to check if we achieve this level, for example, by calculating kappa value. Too low level of agreement may be a suggestion that the next round of a calibration exercise may be necessary. The pilot phase of abstract screening should be continued until every member of our team have a sufficient time to learn and understand the tool, the context, and the process of conducting the abstract screening. Usually at this stage, screening guide may be modified on the basis of a feedback and results of the calibration exercise. So now let's add some corrections to our screening guide in LaserAI.
As you remember, during discussion after calibration exercise, we concluded that additional notes in our screening guide are necessary. So let's go back to the admin mode and implement feedback from the calibration exercise. We are now in project panel. We click on title and abstract screening instruction. Here we have our primary version of screening guide. And first, we need to add a node to the population domain related to cardiac transthyretin amyloidosis. Copy my node and add to the instruction field. So in this project, of course, we want to include patient with cardiomyopathy, but in practice, the cardiac population may not be mentioned in the targeted abstract. So I ask my screeners that at this stage, please include only records with any type of transthyretin amyloidosis. And also, we delete cardiomyopathy from our screening question. Next change was related to the intervention. We need to add new keywords related to the intervention domain, and it will be antisense oligonucleotide. I copy new term and add to keyword section. And modify field instruction by adding new term. In last step, we save our screening instruction, and we may also save this instruction as a template and reuse it in a future project.
So that's the end of the calibration exercise. We have multiple relevant outputs as a result. A modified screening guide ready for the further use, reduced risk of errors and missings in the screening, a well-trained team, and AI model if our calibration exercise was performed in Laser tool. As we presented here, there are some instruments that can be implemented before we can start main screening, and as we saw, Laser supports both of them. But we have to remember that some of other instruments are used in the further stages. We highly encourage you to follow our social media because next webinar will be dedicated to them. So let's sum up how LaserAI can help to improve screening phase. First, Laser has a dedicated module both for screening guide development and pilot testing. Next, during the whole screening process, screeners have direct, easy, and constant access to screening instructions that can be modified after a calibration exercise. It also allows to select a random sample for the pilot exercise. And finally, we have a module that makes discussion during calibration exercise far more efficient and comfortable.
To evaluate how well-performed calibration exercise and well-developed screening guide can support screening, we are currently conducting an experiment that aims to explore if a three-stage screening approach with calibration exercise, main single screening phase, and quality assurance stage, which are supported by all LaserAI tool features, reduces screening burden for all types of systematic reviews in health economic domain. As I mentioned, our experiment will focus on one area. We will select a sample of systematic reviews in this experiment to capture a variety of topic areas and review sizes. And our sample will be selected to be broadly representative for all types of systematic reviews with cost effectiveness outcomes, and other input parameters for cost effectiveness modeling. And the first type of the systematic review include systematic review of economic evaluation and models. This type of review can be valuable to inform the development of an own economic model, for example, as part of submission to HTA agency. And this type of reviews may be also informative for decision makers in resource allocation decision for health technology interventions, especially in countries with limited capacity for health technology assessment. Second type of review in this family includes systematic review of health state utilities, which are conducted, for example, as part of HT assessment or patient values and preferences assessment. And finally, burden of illness systematic reviews cover such topics as epidemiological, health-related quality of life, and economic impact of disease. And this type of assessment supports, for example, reimbursement decision, regulatory approvals, or some pricing strategies. Systematic reviews are projects that generally need to be completed within a defined period with a limited budget, and the traditional double screening approach is the most often recommended. However, as we all know, it is time and resource consuming. In general, systematic reviews for cost and cost effectiveness outcomes should follow the same structured steps as these traditional systematic reviews, but frequently time and resources for this type of review are limited. Published evidence showed that only in about half of the real systematic reviews in this health economic domain, at least 2 reviewers screen all identify studies independently, and single screening, of course, is an alternative. However, it's too risky. In 2019, a systematic methodological review was published with the evidence available on whether single screening is equivalent to double screening, and a single screening approach may lead to excluding 3 or even 13% of relevant studies, depending on the experience of the review team. To accelerate our screening, we may also consider some text mining option, and this strategy seems to be promising, but there are still some barriers and doubts about their effectiveness. The number of systematic reviews in the field of economic evaluations are increasing, And for example, based on our targeted search in PubMed, over the past decade, the number of records related to cause-utility analysis has increased almost five times. And what is worth to mention that this estimation doesn't include the many unpublished reviews which are undertaken as part of health technology assessment. Recent ISPOR good practices for critical appraisal in systematic reviews for cost and cost-effective outcomes, besides traditional double screening method, list two screening approaches to accelerate this process. So we may accelerate our screening with some single screening approaches or some text mining option. And as I mentioned earlier, those strategies seem to be promising, but there are still some barriers and doubts about their effectiveness. So our idea is to take the best from those three approaches. And our user-based evaluation aims to explore if a three-stage screening approach with calibration exercise, main screening stage, and quality assurance stage, supported by all LaserAI tool features, reduces screening burden for all types of this systematic review, and is a safe alternative compared to the traditional double screening approach. In our approach, duplication is conducted using a machine learning model algorithm. Next, records are uploaded into Laser for three-stage screening. We start with calibration exercise, and here we have double screening on sample of records. And during this stage, we of course validate our screening guide, and this stage is some kind of training phase for both screeners and AI model. Next, we have a single screening of the remaining citations, and this stage is supported by AI record privatization. And finally, we have quality assurance stage performed by a second screener, but only on those records for which first reviewer and the AI model disagreed, plus supplemental screening is if needed. The study's primary endpoint will be the proportion of records and studies missed, of course in comparison to reference standard, and secondary outcomes include total time spent on screening, workload, and time savings, of course compared to double screening. To sum up, to the best of our knowledge, our project is the first user-based evaluation of an AI-driven screening approach in systematic reviews of cost and cost-effectiveness outcomes, which evaluate effectiveness of screening approach that combines human and AI effort in three-stage screening process. And finally, we want to briefly present first results from pilot study. We selected one systematic review of cost-effectiveness analysis for pharmacological management for osteoarthritis, and our approach found all studies included in the original review. Title and abstract screening workload was reduced by 33%, whereas the estimated time savings was almost 20 hours. And this first result suggests that the AI-assisted single screening approach might reduce human effort in this type of systematic review, and further evaluation in a broader range of reviews is ongoing.
Thank you for the presentation, and we have received some comments already in the chat and in the questions and answers about the price of the tool, and this will be negotiated individually. So depending on number of projects and number of users, you should contact us at sales@LaserAI for more details. If you have any questions, please type them in the questions and answer. And in the meantime, we also have received some questions in the chat. First one for Ewelina. Is it always beneficial to conduct a pilot exercise and develop a screening guide?
Thank you for this question. And the short answer is it depends, because of course, as you saw in the presentation, a lot of institutions and organizations suggest that it's necessary. But for example, if we have really simple questions, it's not necessary, because we exactly know what to click to include or to exclude. Next, if our team is really experienced, we also may consider skipping this step. And of course, if we have small project, because for example, if we have a few thousand of records, it's really necessary. But if we have a few hundred of records, the amount of time spent on creating this pilot exercise and choosing proper studies is too large in proportion in a proportion to the results. So in conclusion, it really depends, but it's really recommended to increase your quality of screening.
Great, thank you for your answer. I have another question in question and answer. What is the biggest challenge in establishing eligibility requirements? Who of you would like to answer?
Maybe I will answer. From my perspective, definitely selection of question on the title and abstract screening is the most difficult part for me.
Thank you. I have another question in the chat for Ewelina. When we know that the pilot exercise is successful and when we may start screening, how Laser supports this?
Okay, so as you saw in the webinar, in the video, we can assess the pilot exercise by calculating disagreement rate, for example, and it's also helpful during the whole screening process. And the disagreement rate is like a percentage of the results in which there is a conflict between screeners. So the lower the disagreement rate, the higher probability of success of the pilot exercise and the whole screening later. So as we said during the video, we really encourage you to follow our social media, because during the next webinars, we will be presenting to you some metrics and features related to this disagreement rate and how to monitor it, how to control the quality of the whole screening process. So that's the most important things.
Thank you, Ewelina. Another question in the chat from Julia. Have you used it for realist reviews, especially for those with a lack of definable keywords?
Maybe I start. So the short answer is no. The longer answer is, because we did not do such reviews yet, but the long answer is, as far as I understand what a realist review means, because there are possibly zillions of definitions, there still are some criteria that you would, by which you are searching for the information. It will be the population of interest or the interventions of interest, even though you may not, even though they may be very broad. So the most specific keywords or the most specific keywords related to the intervention and the population that you're interested in, I think can still be used. But Eva and Ewelina, please chime in if you thought about this more than I did. So there will be some definable questions. Yes, this will be much more broader than a targeted systematic review, or for the lack of better word for this.
Thank you, Jan. If you have nothing to add to this, I have another question for Eva. can we conduct in laser other types of evidence synthesis like scoping reviews? Do you think that a screening guide and calibration exercise should have been developed in this type of review?
Okay, so you can use laser to many types of evidence synthesis like living systematic reviews, scoping reviews, evidence mapping, rapid reviews. And because although the methodology of those reviews is a little bit different, but the main steps are similar. So they can be easily done in our laser. And those types of reviews have very often a broader research question and some explorative nature. So a lot of tagging and labeling during screening is done. And so precise screening instruction and direct access to it during the whole screening will improve the process. And I think the calibration exercise may be also helpful, especially to test if screening instruction is clear for our screeners.
Thank you so much. We are almost reaching the time. Actually, we are reaching the time. So maybe I just ask the last question. So what about full text screening? Can we create a screening guide for this stage in laser and perform calibration exercises as well? Eva,
okay,
maybe you
so
can.
maybe I will answer. Yes, laser supports both title and abstract screening and full text screening, and we may create our screening guide in laser for full text screening in 3 ways. Just as in the case of title and abstract screening. So we may start from scratch or reuse screening guide templates from similar project with similar research question, or we may transfer the screening guide from the previous stage and add additional screening questions that were not used on the title and abstract screening.
Thank you so much. Here on the screen, you can see also our email address in case you have any questions, and follow us on our social media to stay up to date with new events and webinars. Jan, you would like to say something?
Except before I say thank you and bye-bye, there was another question. I'm sorry for again. Shahra Banu asked whether what to do if there is a discrepancy between AI and our screening, and I think that's the short answer, not to make this long, is that it would be similar as a discrepancy between 2 people. At least in a title and abstract screening, we would include both and then review on the later stage. If Eva and Ewelina, if there is anything quick to add to this, otherwise I think we are done. And back to Claudia.
Yeah, in general, you're right. So.
Thank you. Thank you a lot for everybody. Thank you for the questions and for your participation. And see you on the next webinar. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you, everyone, and see you soon. Ciao.